Welcome to our second virtual event in the series Latino Design Histories. The purpose of this series is to exhibit the diverse histories of design production in Latin America. Today we will be learning from Wustavo Quiroga, the president of the Research on Argentine Design Foundation, AIGA. It is an honor to have Wustavo here with us. We are very happy as well to have you all here with us this afternoon. I am Raquel Castedo. I am a member of the board of directors of AIGA Baltimore and of the Society of Arts of Design, known as SoDA. SoDA was founded more than 15 years ago in Baltimore by a volunteer group of design professors, students, and professionals. All of them were passionate about the stories of the design arts, including many diverse areas such as graphic design, illustration, architecture, the arts of books, photography, and many, many more. SoDA has offered over 100 seminars that have explored various topics. So to get an idea of our past events, please, I encourage you to visit our website at sodabaltimore.com. And also be sure to sign up for our mailing list to find out about the upcoming events. On our website, where you will see that since 2019, we have been co-organizing events with AIGA Baltimore and building together a community that is interested in the history of design and its positive impact on the practice of design and contemporary life. If you're interested in helping planning, researching, and/or presenting seminars like this one, or other types of seminars, please do not hesitate to contact us. This event would not be possible without the help of our collaborators, so thank you very much to AIGA Unidos, in particular to Natacha Poggio and Reina Castellanos. Thanks also to Stevenson University and the Vancouver Latin American Cultural Center. A special thanks to them for supporting us. And also special thanks to the volunteers involved in this event. And thanks also to our interpreters, Julieta Mendes and Laura Lafuente. Now I would like to introduce Gerardo Herrera Cortés, who will tell you a bit about AIGA, AIGA. Welcome, Gerardo. Thank you, Raquel. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar, virtual webinar on Latino design histories. I am Gerardo Herrera Cortés, a coordinator of diversity, equity, and inclusion at AIGA Baltimore, which is our local headquarters for the largest professional association of designers in the world. AIGA is committed to promoting the value and the impact of design, both locally and globally, and to working together to inspire, support, and learn together at every stage of our careers. Our 75 locations are 100% managed by volunteers, serving more than 20,000 members across the country. We invite you to learn more about our initiatives at aiga.org. We want to thank all of the leaders of our offices, the members, the national representatives, and above all, the members of our local board of directors, in particular to our new president, Francis Miller, and our programming coordinator, Raquel Castedo, who is the creator of this series of virtual events on Latino design. Also, a special thanks to our guest today, Wustavo Quiroga, and also to our collaborators from AIGA Unidos, Stevenson University, and the Vancouver Latin American Cultural Center for their support to this initiative. For more information about our headquarters and to find out about the upcoming events, visit our website, baltimore.aiga.org. And I give the floor back to you, Raquel. Thank you very much, Gerardo. So I've been checking the chat, and we have people from Peru, Herald, from Cordoba, Argentina, Sebastian, from Oklahoma, Salam Aleik, Steve Morians from Washington, D.C., Roberta Avila is here with us as well, Alexis from Colombia. So I'm very happy to see that many people from many different places, so thank you very much. This event will last about an hour, and also after the presentation by Wustavo, we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please send them through the questions and answers function in Zoom, and feel free to write in your preferred language. We will translate the questions into Spanish if necessary. Now I am very pleased to introduce Wustavo Quiroga to you. Wustavo is an industrial designer from the National University of Cuyo. Also, he is a cultural manager, an institutional consultant, and a design researcher. Wustavo was the co-founder and director of the Foundation of the Interior and of the Museum under Construction in Mendoza. In 2013, he founded the IDA Foundation, the Research on Argentine Design Foundation in Buenos Aires, of which he is currently the president. AIGA is a nonprofit foundation devoted to research, recover, preserve, showcase, and value national design of Argentina. It holds collections integrated by documents and objects related to design, industrial design, graphic design, garment and textile, among others. He has participated in curatorships, editorial projects, talks, congresses in Argentina and abroad, and has received awards for his research and career. Among the projects he has developed is the edition of the book entitled Material Ideas, Argentine Art and Design in the 1960s. It is a benchmark publication which brings together unpublished images, experiences, and testimonies of the protagonists, including some voices that were left out of other publications. So we are very honored to have you here with us. Wustavo, welcome.
Hola, ¿cómo están?
Hello, how are you? Good afternoon to all of you. It's also a pleasure for me to be able to share with you the experience of editing this book together with Malva and a team of people that worked to recover the history of the 1960s through design and visual arts. I will start to show you now some presentations with some images so we can navigate this edition, this publication. This is not a strict navigation in the sense of the index of the book, because you can all see this index, but we will be able to see what other topics addressed by this project.
El proyecto de ideas materiales.
The project of Material Ideas, Art and Design in the 1960s was done with Lucrecia Palacios, who is the director right now of Arte-Ba. She is a young curator who is very interested in as regards her knowledge of different disciplines. We revived some exhibitions by Rogelio Polecelo and the whole manifestations, artistic manifestations of that period. And through that exhibition and revision, we created a publication to very much organized overview of this period. This is an image of the first meeting with different people who are a reference point of that period. You see here an image of 3 authors that participated from the Agens agency, which was the Siam Di Tela agency, moderated by Alan Neumann, and they also participated in this publication. And you see here other reference points. Ángela Basallo, for instance, who is a great graphic designer, and Edgardo Jimenez. They were presenting this publication to the public, the audience. So this is the publication itself. It's an edition that is 350 pages long. It shows in four areas the different aspects of this period. The first is the city, related to the urban development at the time. The second area is experimentalism, psychedelia, and pop, and addresses the manifestations, sociological and artistic manifestations of that period. The third one is forms, materials, and industries, and it has to do with the development, industrial and business development of the time, and the change of production models with new materials such as plastic. And the fourth is design narrative and historiography, which analyzes how the design, the history of design was addressed and shown, and how it complements our historical view of the period. The first area then starts with a text from Aníbal Jakovsky, who addresses imaginary views in literature, in music, and books. You see here two publications. The first one is Hopscotch by Julio Cortázar, and the second one is Con Otra Gente by Haroldo Conti. And these two publications especially, as well as the record Balada para un Loco by Piazzolla and Goyeneche, show an imaginary view of that period in terms of villas, slums, immigrants, the tension on the streets, the development of new buildings, and the mutation of the city. Here, for example, you see a music sheet made by Carlos Alonso, the painter, for Balada para un Loco, this record. This is one of the images of the life during the 60s, to show you this period not in an aesthetic sense, but in a more tangible sense. You see here the arrival of immigrants to different train stations. This is also the case for political tensions, attacks, and coup d'etat. Here you see Berni painting, which is very interesting for us because it addresses the social impact on the works of artists. This is a piece in the collection of the Malva Museum showing a prostitute, Ramona, with Juanito Laguna, a character. And it has to do with the whole of the situation during that period that I mentioned before. Then we have this rock band, Manal, and here in this illustration, you see the obelisk, which is one of the architectural buildings of Buenos Aires, one of the most important ones. And here on this cover art for a Manal record, you see the fabric of Siam. In the same city, you see the contents of music and on all of these themes. This goes to a text addressing a fair trade in the 1960s to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Mayo Revolution. We had the president Arturo Frondizi at that time with a more of a developing view of economics of the time, which creates a production related to the exterior and the interior. That is, it brings the American politics together with the national politics. You see here a map where you have the pavilions, which have been done by great architects of the time, architects that started their careers back then and that that incorporated engineering. You see an aerial view of this area in Córdoba province. You see the monument of the 150th anniversary here, a close-up. You see the development of this bridge of Figueroa Alcorta, which was done by Silvio Gritcher, assisted by Sergio Danelo, who directed this fair trade. And at this fair trade, we witness this change of architecture.
In this case, this was developed by Antonio Bonet, and what's particular about this is the use of the open space, is the optical games that start from these paints in color. Same thing, this pavilion in the US, and how those trade fair spaces will become full of content and knowledge that will have an impact on the topics addressed in that area. This is the shell pavilion. You see the geometrical shape and how on the inside, the Onda group created one of the first multimedia experiences with music, with visual arts, so as to promote the importance of it. This is another topic that the book addresses in the first block. It's Fanny Findelman, Jose Levitz, with a communication system that's called Photodrama. This communication system starts or is based on the space studies that were conducted on the edition subject in the University of Buenos Aires. What they were studying there was the fabric included in space. As of that study, which was only from a morphological point of view, they make an industrial development, that is to say, some panels that take plastic parts that will be adapted there, as you can see on the picture. Finally, these will create big signages, big boards, and this was the beginning of public signage in Argentina, systematized at least. Each of the modules that you can see on this board, on this signage, is 1 meter by 1 meter, and the general composition of it brings out this big ambassador board or signage. This was at the time it was a car. So you can see at the beginning what this was all about and how it was reformulated based on these composition ideas. This imaginary would also go into different kind of architectures, on interior design, on signatures outdoors. So it's not only that it is an aesthetic development or information, but it actually ends up being something used for the general public. This couple of architects and designers migrated to Spain, where they started developing these patents. And finally, they conducted a lot of other works and to bring up more creative inventions. Silvia Plotti is also developing how certain business models came in this case, Olivetti. In addition to seeing the development of the factories and the architectures and the development models in themselves, we will have a look at the communication of it. What you can see here on the screen is Rogelio Coleselo. I remember that this was conducted hand in hand with an exhibition of another artist that was used to working with the industry. So he knew a lot about industrial and graphic design. So you can see here how these imaginaries blend one into the other and how these images from Rogelio Coliselo also become part of discs, for example, or others. So in this case, what we are seeing here is the beginning of the psychedelic or experimentalism. So you can see a more sociological part to it. This is the Mau Mau discotheque on the view of Mario Salcedo and Cristina Archivale, a journalist that works specifically about the night vibe at the time. You can see over here how you have certain aesthetics of the 60s, mainly related to the music, Beatles style in the imaginary, how it blends in. So this idea of music also becomes a bit more technological, if you wish. Francisco Kropfel, in this case, who is a musician specialized in, well, at the beginning in techno music or experimental music, started telling his experiences in the music studies, in the music study center that was included in the Dalia University. Reichenbach also took part there, and they defined and creating certain machines for music interpretation. So these pieces will transfer or convert shapes into music. Part of these experiences were related to creating labs. That is to say, all the materials, all the machines, and how this was communicated from a social point of view by means of the graphic art created by the Ditela department, the graphic department there. This department was made up by Di Stefano, Fontana, and Coppola, as other cooperators, such as Confesan. And they captured all the move and the vibe of the visual arts in Argentina at the time. During this period, psychedelia, experimentalism, or geometrical shapes, pop, all of that was very much present in visual arts. The one you can see here on the screen is Francisco Kropschel himself, and you can see them working here in the development of these machines that, as time went by, were systematized and they became more, let's say, modular elements, if you wish. And what we can study, what we can see here as well, is how all these machines became a subject of study and design in themselves. Susanna Solkin, a sociologist, specialist in fashion, also tells which are the circuits where the fashion at the time was mainly focused on, or how, for example, young people were walking down certain streets, and she pays a lot of attention to another part of the Ditela Institute, which is an area devoted to psychology, sociology, and economy. So that's a department located in Belgrano neighborhood in Buenos Aires. This other department was located in another place, different from where the Ditela Institute is in downtown. Simultaneously in Cordoba, and I want to emphasize this, let me explain where Cordoba is located for those of you who do not know Argentina. It's a province located in the center of the country. And why is it important? Because it makes all the narration not only be focused or stem from the capital city, it also stems from Cordoba. From there, they started creating the American biennales or biannual fairs. They included important artists and important designers. In this case, Rogelio Polestelo started working with Lolo Mengual for the graphic campaign of it. And as of the third time this biennial was conducted, these graphics were communicated by Soto, the Venezuelan artist. So these experiences, art and design, had a strong impact. You can see here on the screen some pieces that are, let's call it applied art, that is art to be consumed. And this idea of art in different spaces of our lives will be reproduced in this presentation from Abasa Molina, an ad company that invited creative people from that time, such as Jorge Vilortis, for example, to participate from this book. You can see that a mass publication can also become an object of art if it's in this regard as cult art. So over here you have another example of the world exhibition of the cartoons which is also conducted in Ditela together with the Pan American Art School, which is an institution, one of the first institutions that actually since the 50s started talking about this kind of art, and then it got consolidated with the first courses of graphic art and design in Buenos Aires. Take into account that the course of studies design officially started in Buenos Aires in 1984. So in this specific experience of the Ditela Institute, you can see several of the main artists of the country in dialogue or in cooperation with other artists, and the impact that this will have on further subsequent publications or posters or designs. This imaginary has an impact on the communication of the art school. In this case, Milas developed this model of the pop Gioconda, which is a leitmotif that Marcel Massey turned into an icon for this institution. This same imaginary I'm talking about then moved on to this magazine called Literatura Dibujada. It was led by people that were very important for that period, and it made this publication conducted by Uma Nueva Visión editorial houses or printing houses, had an impact on the contents as well, because those magazines or journals used to be from architecture, technology, and design. And something that is very important to point out as well is how the drawings, how these cartoons have an impact on both kinds of audiences, adults and children. The next experience is related to AGENS, the development of AGENS, the internal design agency of SIAM, of the SIAM factory, which was one of the most important ones in Latin America in terms of industrial development, cars, appliances, like house appliances. And then with subsidiary brands, they started working on other products, oil pipes, or even gas pipes. So you can see here how the designers of the time, Juan Carlos Di Stefano, the same that was working in Ditela, how they made these kind of communication pieces and how the aesthetics of it became part of their communication. You can see this car, it's a toy, it's small, but it fostered families, like a family purchase of these kind of cars. And this became the typical taxi model or style of car of the time. This was done by an interdisciplinary team that included architects, designs, artists, journalists, and they worked by developing appliances on the one hand, for example, from the restyling or from an ergonomic point of view, the size of each device for better usage. They were also in charge of the communication of the company. Guillermo González Ruiz was working on this visual image as well. And they were also in charge of all the comments. So, for example, the phrases, all the messages that were conveyed, that is to say, sent from the company to the general public. These were some of the meetings among these businessmen and people in charge of the area of design. And look at the aesthetics of them at the time and how the professionalization of this area was also related to the attitude or also to the link between design and companies. What you can see here, part of the pavilions that were developed by AGENS as areas for the development or for the promotion of these products. This one is located in Rural Society in Argentina, which is a very big fair ground that allowed for the construction of all these things. This implied one of the first multimedia experiences at the time, in close dialogue with Francisco Kropfel and with the AGENS. developers and designers. You can see here on the screen a poster with all the members back then at the time. And something in particular to point out is the amount of women that were part of these teams. It's not always, I mean, they're not always designers, they're also administrative members. But it is important to point that out because you know that in the official story of design, women did not have so much of a share, and now they are getting better and improving those quotas. You can see the imaginaries of the time, such as, for example, reaching the moon, how they became part of this communication as well, and how an air conditioning became something new or something technological, and this idea of a capsule included there as well.
Estas experiencias industriales como las
These industrial experiences, such as the one I told you just now, as this cooperation, is also seen in some relationship between publicity agencies as Sisero and building companies such as Bureau. These companies are different groups of businessmen who created appliances or stationery for offices. You see here the poster, and it has to do with how design was thought in the country. This poster speaks to the 10th anniversary of this company, but it had a negative impact because people, consumers, thought this had to do with imported products. You see here how the technology developed, for instance, aluminum or different plastics that were the same plastics that were used for the doors of fridges. And you see how companies start cooperating in different areas of the business. You have here the Italian imaginary of design. In Argentina, we have a more playful and colorful chairs, for instance. This moment related to materials and the young people working on design is reflected on Madame Frou Frou, which is a shop, clothes shop, where Rosita Gailon worked with designs from recycled materials. This idea of shops, of used clothes in shops, was worked by these people who created new products. And you see here the appearance of the vintage, an early vintage idea of products. You see here a small Rosita Bailon and Madame Frou Frou's shop intervened on its facade by Marejo, who did the cover art for Manal, which is quite Disney-like. And you see here many of the characters that became very famous and at this place, which was a center for the youth back then. This was done by Melissa Pinto, a very renowned journalist of that time. She wrote for Primera Plana, a politics journal, and her texts created an important impact in terms of mass audience. You see here how a couple of artists started working on fashion and then had a very successful career in Paris. They started developing both clothes and graphic pieces. You see here one of the sketches of Dalia Puso, who worked with Charlie Esquirru, her partner, and sometimes she worked with Edgardo Jimenez, creating some particular works that we will see later on. You see this idea of visuality, culture, and art that becomes part of clothes, of garments. You see here this knitted piece where she remixes indigenous Incaic clothes. think about this color palette in the 60s in opposition with the people who dressed up in suits back then. They developed many patterns and models for garments, and these types of garment products were produced at the late 60s and early 70s at an international level. They were made in cotton and they were very much present in the American market. In this case, we see another of the authors that started working during the 60s, Marita Marapia. She recovered artisanal crafted materials from Argentina, very native products, and this had an impact, a direct impact on her designs of garments. You see here one of her first presentations in the Colmena bathrooms. She was one who brought back the Argentine folklore traditions. So in some way, this I'm showing you has to do with different platforms of training and creation. So for this last part, we invited Javier de Ponti, who will be reviewing from different points of view these types of spaces. So we started with the first design institutions, CELIDI in this case, in Rosario City in 1960 by Jorge Vilortis. This institute is located at the engineering faculty school of the Literal University, is where we see at a very early stage a more scientifically like productions related to what Tomás Maldonado did back then. We also had Industrias Kaiser Argentina, where we also see the development of these types of things in the provinces of the country. We see here one of the internal communications publications for this company, and another of the institutions, maybe the most important one for its relationship with different companies, is CIDI, the Center of Research on Industrial Design. The city was in charge of giving awards and prizes to enhance the industrial works produced here in Argentina and for countries abroad. They were responsible for carrying out many exhibitions during the 70s and the 80s, working to promote Argentine design. And so undoubtedly the Torcuato Di Tella Institute, which is the one I mentioned before, was one of the most important training centers of the period. In this case, we see the work with font types, which become one of the benchmark things of this institute, which also had an impact on the early stages of font type development and design. Finally, we have Silvia Fernandez, one of the most renowned historians of Argentina, who talked about her experience and the role of women in the 1960s. We see here Colette Bocara. She's an architect located in Mendoza province who worked with ceramics called Grest from the mountains of Mendoza. You see here these plates, these glasses, which in some cases were intervened artistically by herself. We also have Lidi Prati, who is an artist of the concrete art movement of the 50s. She started participating in graphic design and planning and communicating this type of design. And during the 60s, We see actually here the Mundo Argentino magazine from 1956. We see also Josefina Rodríguez Bauzá, who is the partner of Reinaldo Leiro, the president of the Buro company. She raised her daughters and also developed children products, and these pieces for training, for teaching. These pieces were for children to build by themselves, to build their own types of environments. Within these spaces, we have Sisero Publicita, which is one of the greatest, largest publicity agencies of the time, directed by Lala Méndez Mosquera, who also carried out the Suma publishing house. We had the participation of some special women here, Ángela Basaldo, for instance, who later became the president of this agency, and who also created many pieces that in some way have this psychedelic and pop imaginary of this visual artistic designs that were also brought to the communication pieces for different companies. We also have the case of Colmenero, Maria Luisa. She was responsible of the communications area of CD. And what's interesting about this is that she systematized the communication with very simple elements, for instance, working with ink to represent this institution. We also see the impact of different materials, for instance, the plastic, and its impact on industrial production. We see here Margarita Paxa. She is a conceptual artist that was very important during the 1960s movements. She developed together with her partner, Cairola, MAG, which stands for acrylic furniture. From her their shop, they worked with different appliances and furnitures with acrylic, which is very characteristic of this period we're speaking about. Also, something related with equipment design. We see here a publicity by Six, which is a furniture company where we have the work of Juan Gurcha. And in this case, this poster is developed by the same team that developed the pieces for Suma magazine. We see here one of the graphic designs of this very important magazine, and some other images related to pop art, in this case that were influenced by Le Parc, carried out by Lala Méndez Mosquera. We have here Sara Torosiam on the screen at the publishing house itself, and I would like to point out something about the environment, the working environment. We see precarity of these spaces, and they worked manually on these graphic pieces. This is also an advert, a publicity of Cinsano, where we see the relationship between different agencies and companies. We have here a publicity carried out by Raúl Manruque and Juan Carlos Di Stefano. Raúl Manrupe is the one who wrote the final piece for the final chapter of our publication. And there he addresses the relationship between publicity and design. We know that historiographically, many times these two areas have been separated. But however, the starting of these two areas are very much interrelated. We see Edgardo Jimenez working on the Schuster Publicity Agency, And here we see how by working by some companies, he also creates some artistics posters. He will be one of the greatest designers from his teenage years in working in communication pieces. He, together with some colleagues, participated in one of the most important publicity artistic movements. They created the poster panel that is on the street, a very large poster promoting themselves with the phrase, "Why are they so cool?" This is one of the phrases that is the most known of the design period in Argentina. Seeing this very close relationship between publicity and design, we also addressed this other moment related to the Mecca company, which worked with different traditions of urban communications. This poster is also related to comic books. It was carried out by Ronald Shakespeare, who is one of the main designers of this time, this period. And this is the final image I wanted to show you. And as you can see, this publication has many areas, addresses many topics related with many disciplines. We have different opinions, almost opposite and contradictory opinions and stances, but it's interesting to see that it addresses a period from a very multivariate area. So what's key is here to understand the history of design in its context. We need to push the reference frameworks. I talked about the narratives from the capital of a country, and it goes to the adjacent areas, to a more broad horizon. We see how different cultures and identity come to play here, and how all of this together can show the history of the country itself.
Wow, Wustavo.
Well, Wustavo, I'm very happy. Thank you very much. I had access to the book before, but with your presentation, it all seems even more incredible. The work of bringing together all of these stories and histories in one publication is amazing. It's a great challenge. So there are many, many things to comment on. We have some questions, I think. And the first, but actually, before that comment, I would like to make a comment. I love to see some exchanges between cultures. There are many exchanges between Brazil and Argentina, but we see an exchange from Roberto Carlos, which is so psychedelic and progressive, because the psychedelia in Brazil was also a very important style in Brazil, but I don't recall seeing a Roberto Carlos cover art that is as progressive in Brazil. So I imagine that maybe the Argentine audience was a more avant-garde or more open audience. So I love to see Brazil represented there by Roberto Carlos. So our first question, I think we will overrun the time that was said before. I understand that if some people in the audience need to leave, it's fine, but we will go over 1 hour to ask the questions here. So first of all, can you speak about the work of archives, collection archives carried out by AIGA Foundations? Because it seems that it's quite unique in Latin America, and we have a question from the audience. How and in what context was the AIGA Foundation created? Well, it's interesting to be able to comment to see how the AIGA Foundation was born. It was born in 2013 from the work of a team of designers and businessmen, people who were committed to the history of the country. Until then, there was no institution that was in charge of heritage archives, of getting together all of the pieces, collection pieces at one place and give them a global context meaning to that material. At studying centers, we see works from Europe and North America, but we are lacking information on our own country. So from the work of this institution that was created 8 years ago, we were able to start cooperating with many universities and centers and researchers to create new stories, to broaden what we know officially as design history. So in that sense, we had a particular management model that we have millions of pieces. We have, I don't know if I can share some images of this. You see these heritage funds, they are organized by disciplines, by topic. We collect all these pieces, we recover them, we put on each element a code or a reference with the credits of the people who made them. We also complement our work with the living experience of authors, artists, or business men, business people. So that is to have a general view of this, all of these pieces. So we understand this as a social heritage. So regardless of being organized by one foundation, the goal is to have a national heritage. I think is one of the most relevant archives in Latin America in this area of design. It is very important in terms of publications, of our own publications, and journalists and magazines that are all the time consulting us on this. And also we cooperate with museums in different exhibitions, events, presentations. And this allows us to be in contact with the general audience. So a foundation of like this one had to work little by little to achieve institutionalization and be sustainable over time.
Undoubtedly, the AIGA organization is doing a great work in terms of archives. And I wonder whether you have a favorite piece out of this collection and why, or a couple of favorites, I should say, right? Well, there is one piece in particular, which is the prototype of the CKF sofa or couch. It was created by Ferrari Cardoi, and the prototype of this couch, that is to say, it's a prototype because it came before the industrial construction, and it has rubber, it has iron, then like all the things were taken from other materials, and they were trying to create what they had in mind in order to produce it later on with leather, etc. This shows the beginning, the early stage of a piece that shows, I mean, the thoughts, the ideology that comes behind all of that, the thoughts of objects for daily life. And that's one of the first places, where this was implemented was in the Atelier building in downtown of Buenos Aires. And this also shows the typology of it, because it's not typical chair, let's say, or even couch where you would sit. It's one to relax. It's very youthful in its design, and it's much more logic when you understand where it came from. Then, of course, it received a lot of awards, etc., and it ended up being part of many collections. Okay, so as you said in your presentation, context, right? The context of creation is very important to take into account as well. And I mean, presenting all these pieces, all the pieces that you showed us, that you shared with us, well, I mean, it was amazing. So thank you indeed for sharing so much information with us. Let me see, there is another question here about typography as well.
No estoy cierta si comprendí.
I'm not sure whether I understood the question correctly or not, but I'll give it a try. There are many cases of typography being used as illustrations within design, and something that is quite strong is also the European or modern influence on typography in the Argentine design. We can see this from different images that you presented, that you shared with us now. So could you expand a little bit more about the use of, let's say, free use of fonts or typology in Argentina as a graphic element, or also the European or modern influence? Yes, well, this modern typology or fonts in Argentina is related to the figure of Tomás Maldonado, who was part of the Concrete Art Group, and he was in charge back then. He was in charge of Axis, a modern ad or publicity company. They brought the sans serif typology or fonts, and they started working with very harsh or strict ways in order to develop the concrete graphic art that they were seeking. And they were in editorial publications such as the Nueva Visión magazine. And this also brought about a certain criteria of how strict the graphic design was at the time. That structure was revisited later on by the members of the Ditela Institute. And I think that the key figure here is Rubén Fontana, Noberto Coppola as well, I should say, because both of them were very much updated with the development of typography. So they brought it to a point where the word is the figure. So the figure is made up by the word itself, by the fonts, the letters themselves. So that creates a kind of game between the typographic and the images. Fontana was an icon of typography, and he was one of the creators of the Tipográfica magazine, which was a magazine that systematically published articles about this specialty. It included authors from all Latin America, from the world, and it actually promoted the development of local fonts or typography. So Rubén is the author as well of many other typographic fonts, and he's also the creator of a master's course of typographic design in the University of Buenos Aires. So that's roughly or briefly it. I mean, where it all comes from and why there was so much of an impact of fonts in the Ditela Institute and why it is one of the pioneers. There is another question, as a matter of fact, that I think is related to this one. It's a statement. It talks about the importance of finding a unique way, or an Argentine, a Latin American way.
Quotes aquí.
And, or let's say that is not so violently attacked by the Eurocentric concept of beauty or design or whatever it is. So I do believe that here, based on what you said in your presentation, you can actually see that there was a big influence coming from Europe, but in Argentina, it changed. It was somehow modified. So if you can see, you can see a unique manifestation in typography fonts based on the local context of Argentina in this case. So something, I mean, there are so many things that I would like to ask you. But okay, let's focus on another comment that was here made by one of the people in the audience. They said that they were glad to see how many women were representing in the text of Silvia Fernandez. Well, hi Silvia, because I know she's here with us in the audience. I mean, you need to have a strong purpose behind all of this, you know. I could also say an effort to make always the other voices be heard. That is to say, voices that were not so highly valued in design, at least at that time. So I do believe that this was a very important part of your work or what you've shown us. So how can we all have access to the AIGA Foundation, or in case there are researchers here or people who are interested in seeing more about this collection? Well, the collection is working with different platforms, many of which are digital. So it's easy to have access to the website. First of all, you have some consultation forms that you can fill in, and then we can just assess your request and we try to give an answer to it. Very frequently, we ask people to make further research in our own website or even the previous posts, because we are in constant touch with other archives. I would say that, let's say 90% of our information is actually new information. It's kind of information that is not known or has not been published in other places. And this allows us to contribute with new visions, with new elements, new ways to actually understand or to think about the history of design. So if you have a look at our Instagram page or, well, different apps or different social media, you will be able to see how our content is shared. You can also join our newsletter. In that newsletter, the information is more organized. It's more related to what we call the 100-year review of design. Based on that, we started talking about the different periods from the 1920s to the 40s, the decade of the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, which is where the professionalization of design came in our way, then the dictatorships, the military coups, the start of democracy. So we make a review, an analysis of all these periods compared or hand in hand with a social and political point of view. All that information is in our websites, on our social media. It's all opened and it would be great. I mean, we would be glad to have students, researchers to have access to it and to share those materials. Great to know. So we invite all of you to visit your website, the website of the IDA Foundation. And Wustavo, just one final question, if I may. What are you working on right now? What are you, I mean, the AIGA Foundation or you personally? What are you interested in? What are you working on? Well, lastly, I was aiming at reviewing these 100 years of design by analyzing different parts of Argentina, because, you know, the country is quite large and it does change a lot from one place to the other, the landscape, the traditions as you move throughout the country. So what we were trying to do was to understand design in its full complexity. That's one thing. Then based on that experience, which of course we created information and posts to share on the website and on the social media, we are also creating an editorial collection that will be printouts, and a series of documentary films to show those spaces, the situations. We will try to go back in time so that we ourselves will be able to understand from the current times what design was all about at the different times, because it's very different to think about the design in the 20s and in the current times. And those 100 years of difference show us how the concept of design expanded. What we used to call design in the 1920s is a commodity nowadays. Now we are in a different kind of platforms, or in a different kind of development stage of the discipline. So how this changes is also very interesting, how it goes hand in hand with the changes in life. So as mankind evolves, society evolves, and design also changes. I believe that, yes, I think the whole team is based or focused on that. We are 30 people in our team, 30 professionals who are working full-time on creating content to be shared. And from a personal point of view, I'm also cooperating as a curator from Mohamed, that in an exhibition that will be launched in November this year in the Decorative Art Museum. Christian is one of the most interesting young designers in Argentina, I should say, because he makes this blend between arts, craftsmanship, design. So he has a very interesting proposal where he shows a lot of traditions from throughout the country, and he blends all of that into a great heritage of great value. So I'm cooperating with him as well. Great to know that. I really want to know more about it. You have the doors are open, so you have all our support to present anything else you may want to present in the future, to share with us. Thank you indeed, Wustavo. It was a pleasure indeed to have you here with us today. I've been learning so much about Argentine design lately, and by being in touch with AIGA Foundation. I'm delighted with your work. So indeed, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank Silvia Fernandez as well, who put me in contact with you. I hope that this was useful for you, all this content. And indeed, we are going to continue cooperating for future initiatives. Thank you indeed, Wustavo. So thanks, big thanks to all of you who are listening. If you want to know about our future events, you can also join our newsletters, both from Baltimore.org or in SoDA, Baltimore.com. We are going to leave the chat box open for 5 more minutes in case you want to review the information that we pasted there or chat among you. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us. Join us in our social media, and I hope you'll have a very good afternoon or evening, all of you. Thank you.